Hi everyone, it's Tarrant.
And Stella here from Meeple University on the Dice Tower. Thanks for joining us.
Today we'll be teaching you how to play Temple of Horrors, game designed by Michelle Quondam and published by geochix.it. We're using a prototype copy here of the game, and so the rules and components may not be final.
Let's get to it.
Based on the classic Dungeons & Dragons campaign, Temple of Horrors is a dungeon crawler for 1 to 4 players. The heroes have entered the cursed temple, and now they need to explore the rooms, face the creatures, level up their characters, complete quests, gain a magic shard to break the curse of the temple, and escape. Temple of Horrors has many different adventures, playable in cooperative, semi-cooperative, and campaign modes. In this shot, you can see the wall miniature system, which is planned for the final game, but for most of this video, we'll be showing from overhead and won't be using those walls. Through this video, we'll explain how to play a single cooperative adventure and describe the other variants at the end of the video. To set up, find the dungeon entrance and place it at one end of your table. This is designated the south end for directions in the game. Set aside the 4 big room tiles, which show no walls. Then shuffle all the remaining room tiles into a face-down stack and lay out 6 face-up. Shuffle the bosses, maps, and clues. This is the hour board where you'll track the game's progress, your side quests, and creature health. For now, just place the hour marker on the first round. You'll now choose and set up your character. On your player board, set your starting health based on the dotted square and set all of the rest of your statistics to 0. Look through your deck of power cards and find the one which shows the red star in the top corner. This is your starting power. Through the game, you'll be gaining experience points, which you can use to upgrade these 6 tracks or upgrade to better powers. And as part of setup, each player has 3 experience, which are used immediately to upgrade tracks. Some of these upgrades may give you additional components, which I'll talk about later. Players take their matching player-coloured disc, 8 white mana cubes, and 9 action cubes in player colour. Put one of those in the centre of the table, along with a cube from each other player, and a red and black cube. These are the initiative cubes and are used in setting turn order. Of the rest, put 3 action cubes onto your player board. Anything that's not on your player board is called your stock, and this is what you've got available to spend at any given time. Anything that's on your player board is called your reserve. You can't spend it, but you'll get some of that back to your stock at the end of each hour. Anything in neither location is in the general supply. Each player gains 1 coin. Shuffle the item deck and lay out a market of 5 cards. These show items on the front side and various icons on the back which serve as a randomizer in the game. Also place the double-sided item tile market and then on it place 1 breach, 1 barrier and 1 illusionary wall. Keep the creature minis nearby ready for use. Most of these are the weakest creatures, which are the minions. Next are the elite minions, and you'll use the same pieces but place them on an elite marker. Then you have the leaders, and finally the bosses, which are the strongest of all. Everything you need to know about fighting these enemies is shown in this place of your player board or on the boss's card for the bosses. The youngest player is designated the lead player, and the lead player decides all ties during the game. That is, anything in the rules where there are equally valid options, the lead player decides which one goes. The players may call for a vote at any time to change the lead player by a majority, and if that vote is tied, whoever has the most coins becomes the lead. You're unlikely to need this procedure in the cooperative mode, but in the semi-cooperative it may be important. Choose an adventure and read its story, its objectives, and how you win. Some may require some additional setup using a map card, and we'll describe that later. Place the hero minis on the entrance tile, and you're now ready to play. Temple of Horrors is played in hours, and each hour is played in 5 phases. First, advancing the hour marker, then rolling for initiative, Then the actions phase, where heroes and creatures take actions, and this is the bulk of the game. Then adding new creatures to the map, and finally resetting for the next hour. First, advance the hour marker, moving it one step to the right except in round 1. If you enter a refresh space, sweep out any item cards remaining in the market, then refill cards and items as in setup. Note the colour and icons of the hour as these come into play later on. Then comes the initiative phase, and you'll roll all of the initiative cubes onto the table and then sequence them in the order they land from north to south. This will set the initiative order for the actions phase, which now begins. The actions phase takes place in a series of action rounds, and in each action round you'll resolve each initiative cube in order. For this demonstration, I have placed cubes to represent the colours of each of the minis. Any mini which shares a room with a mini of the opposing side, so hero and creature, is said to be in melee. Any other mini is not. Minis that are not in melee take explore actions, and they do this when their coloured cube is resolved. Minis in melee take melee actions, and these occur when the red cube is resolved. So for the action round laid out here, the orange cube would be ignored because the barbarian is in melee. The green cube lets the thief take an explore action. The black cube results in all creatures not in melee taking an action, so here it would be the spiders but not the goblins. On the red cube, this melee is resolved, and on the blue cube, the mage takes an explore action. It's possible for a single hero or creature to activate twice in the same action round, for example by moving into a melee early and then having the melee late. Be warned, you only get up to 3 action cubes back each round, so don't spend them all at once. We'll now talk about the different types of hero explore actions, and we'll focus on the basic actions for how you move around the dungeon. Some of the features more specific to adventures and quests we'll come back to nearer the end. On an explore activation, a hero can take one main action and any number of free actions. The main action always involves placing an action cube into the room that you start the action, and this influences the attracting of creatures. The first main action is move, and it lets you move one space to an adjacent room through a door. If you've upgraded your movement, you can spend 1 mana to your reserve to move an extra space, or 2 mana to move 2 extra spaces. If you enter an unexplored room, then you get to place a new room tile from the 6 face up, or by drawing blindly from the draw deck. Your placement must preserve existing doors and walls. For example, if you took this L-shaped tile, you could not place it here, but you could place it here. If you draw blindly and the tile you draw has no legal placement, then discard it and keep drawing until you have one that does. The temple cannot extend behind the starting tile, and any open doors on the back edge are considered walls. Some rooms have an immediate effect upon entry which you now resolve, but I'll cover those later in the video. If you enter a room containing creatures, your activation ends and you're now in melee. A room is full once it contains minis equal to 5 plus the number of players, or if there's a boss in the room, then that boss counts for 2 minis. No other mini can enter a full room. The second main action is map, and you can use this to sweep out the 6 room tiles and then replace them with 6 new ones from the deck. The third main action is to activate a room, and when you do this you'll resolve the room's effect and then place a deactivated token over the icon, so it can't be used again. Again, we'll cover room specifics later in the video. The next main action is search, and you can search any room that has a black coloured icon that hasn't previously been deactivated. Deactivate the room and then do a treasure check for coins. You'll discard the top card of the item deck and then draw the next 3, and you'll gain any treasures that are shown on the back side of the cards. First you'll gain coins. Each player in the room of the search will gain the total number of coins shown on the cards plus 2. So both of these players get 3 coins. Stars grant the players experience points, and each player in the game, not just in the room of the search, gains 1 star for each of these drawn. Finally, if the magic shard is drawn, you'll drop a magic shard matching the room's colour in the room. In current initiative order, each player has the opportunity to pick up that shard. The shards are the only way to break the curse, keeping the players trapped in the temple, so each player has to end the game with one of these. Any other icons are ignored, and all cards drawn are discarded. The next 2 actions are ways of manipulating the layout of the dungeon. First, you can find a secret passage. Spend your action when you're in a room which is part of a 2x2 grid of rooms, whether they are or are not connected. Then take any one of the 4 big room tiles that were set aside at the start of the game and place it colour side up in the middle of the square. This is now considered a big room made up of 4 sub-rooms, each of which now takes on the colour of the big room tile. The sub-rooms retain their individual characteristics. This is still a tomb, a trap, and so on. You still move and interact with the sub-rooms as if they were rooms of their own. In addition to clearing walls, this is one of the major ways to make large room groups in the game. A room group is a set of adjacent and connected rooms of a matching colour. For example, this is a blue room group of 2, this one being a wall here separating it from this. But by turning this into a blue big room, you now have a room group of 6 blue rooms. This will be important for many of your quests and adventures. You'll have to have found a room group of a certain colour or size or both to achieve certain objectives in the adventure. The 6th action is to create a breach, which is to smash a hole through a wall. If there is no breach tile in your room, place the tile and then place the action cube on top of that tile. If there is a tile, simply place your cube on top. Once the 4th cube is placed, the breach is complete. The players take those action cubes back to their stocks and then flip the breach over, placing it onto a wall, creating a door. You can breach a double wall or breach a single wall, which will need to be treated as a door when you later explore the tile beyond it. The 7th main action is to use one of your hero powers, and specifically this will be any hero power which says to put an action cube down. These ones are used as your main action. The 8th main action is to make a ranged attack against an enemy who is in your line of sight. Resolving the attack is quite similar to resolving melee attack, except it occurs in your explore phase, so we'll come back when we talk about melee to understand how this works. The 9th main action is simply to make noise. Place an action cube, but do nothing else, and this can help you manipulate where the creatures move on their turn. As a 10th option, you can also choose to take no main action at all. This simply means you do nothing on this action round, but you can still take actions again on subsequent action rounds in the same hour. All these actions are listed here in the reserve section of your board. On your Explore activation, you can also take any number of free actions, shown here with the lightning bolt, and you can take them before or after your main action. The first option is free movement, and while it doesn't cost an action cube, it does cost your action disc, so you can only take it if you have this disc. You'll place the disc instead of your cube, but then otherwise take the action exactly as you would a normal movement. You can buy an item from the face-up item market, paying the cost in the top left corner to take the card, or paying 1 coin to take a tile from the tile card. Purchased items are not replenished. Items are added to your hero tableau, and you can hold a maximum of 6 between both tiles and cards. You can't hold more than 1 item of any one type, except for potions and rings. You can also use one of your items as a free action. Some of them will boost specific other actions, but others are standalone. Here, for example, recovering 1 mana. An item showing this icon is tapped sideways and can be used once per hour, then replenished, while an item showing this icon is used once and discarded. To use an item tile, you'll place that tile in your current room to manipulate the map, and there are 3 types: breaches, barriers, and illusionary walls. Breaches we saw before. You'll place it to create a door where there used to be a wall. You can also play a breach while you're exploring a new room as part of a movement to create a door where one is needed. To play a barrier, place it across an existing door or breach. You can create stacks of barriers which are multiple tiles high. These block movement for both heroes and creatures, but they don't block line of sight. And as another free action, costing 1 mana cube to your reserve, you can remove any number of barriers from a stack. An illusionary wall is a fake wall that you can place across a door, breach, or barrier as long as you're not within line of sight of a creature when you do it. Creatures will think this is a real wall for the rest of the round, so this will block line of sight and creature movement. However, the heroes know that it's fake, and you can choose to move through it, destroying it. As a free action, heroes in the same room can exchange items. This applies only to item cards and item tiles. Coins, shards, and experience cannot be exchanged, and neither can components in player colour or white. Other free actions are to interact, meaning to pick up a shard or a tile which is specific to your adventure, to use the effect of a power card which does not have an action cube cost, or to spend experience to level up your hero. There are 3 ways to do this. You can spend 1 experience to push one of these track cubes up 1 step to the right. If you reach an icon like this, gain the matching resource or cube to your stock. Gaining a heart on the health track adds 1 to both your health and your maximum health, and the benefits on the movement track we saw before. Your second option is to pay 2 experience to look through all of the cards in your power deck and then choose one that you wish to add, placing it on the level 1 side. The third option is to spend 4 experience and then flip any one of your powers over to the level 2 side. With 10 power cards and 6 track specializations, there are lots of different ways to customize your hero. The Black Initiative cube triggers creature exploration, and here you'll move each pack of creatures which has at least 1 movement cube and which is not in melee. Creatures in the same room always move as packs. They are a single pack sharing these movement cubes. The lead player chooses in which order you'll activate the packs. For each pack, first remove a movement cube. Then you'll move the pack up to a maximum of 2 rooms, unless there is a spectre among the pack, in which case the whole pack can move 3 rooms. On each step, you'll check for line of sight and then noise to see where the pack moves. First, check to see if there are any heroes in line of sight, which is anything along a straight line unless it's blocked by a wall, an illusion wall, or a full room. A single empty space in the map also does not block line of sight, so this hero is still in this pack's line of sight. But line of sight is blocked by a second empty space. The pack will move with its movement cubes 1 step towards a hero in line of sight, and towards the nearest hero if there's more than 1. If there's no one in line of sight, the pack will move towards the nearest action cube that is within its perceptible range, like so. If tied, the pack moves towards the one with more action cubes. The range of perception of each creature type is shown here, 4 for minions, 5 for elite and leaders, and 6 for bosses. A pack's combined perception is equal to its highest individual perception, so this one here with a single elite minion would have perception of 5. And if the pack is going to move towards the action cubes, then those cubes need to be within that distance by an orthogonal path through doors. If there is no action cube within that range, then the creature pack becomes wandering. Its movement, even if with spectres, is reduced to 1, and it moves towards the nearest hero, wherever it is on the map. If a creature pack enters a room with a +1 or a +2 icon, then its movement is increased by that amount. So these skeletons, which would normally have only 2 range, can now move up to 4 and now move up to 6. Its movement ends once it's in melee. Through all of these steps, treat any empty spaces where tiles are yet to be placed as if they have a direct path to the nearest hero. Here, for example, this skeleton pack is going for the nearest action cube, which is 1, 2, 3 for the orange cube versus 1, 2, 3, 4 for blue. That means the skeleton's first step will be to move this way. The lead player now places a new room tile, either from the supply or the stack, following the same rules as if a hero had explored it. But with one extra restriction. The tile must be placed so it preserves the shortest path to the current target. Had this tile been chosen, this would not have been a legal placement because it makes the creatures take a longer way around. The tile would have to be placed like this. So let's go through a complex example of how this works. Here we have a Spectre pack, which has a basic movement of 3. For its first move, there are no heroes in line of sight, so it's going to go to the single nearest action cube, which is this one, at a distance of 1, 2, 3 versus 1, 2, 3, 4. This will mean it will move here to get closer to the cube. The situation is unchanged for the second move. Because of the 2 gap here, this hero is not in line of sight, and so the nearest place to go is here, trying to get to that cube. The lead player decides to draw blind, but gets a tile which doesn't fit, so discards it. The next tile drawn is this one, and this does fit, so it goes here, and the spectres move onto it. +1 movement means the spectres have 2 steps of movement left. Now the target has changed. This hero is within line of sight, so now instead of going to this cube, the spectres are going to move 1 step into here. This time, the lead player chooses a green trap tile from the display of 6, seeing the opportunity to make a green room group of 5. For the final movement, there are now 2 heroes in line of sight. This hero is closer, so the spectre's target changes again, and they move up to here. Some other rules for creature movement. Creatures can neither see nor hear through an illusionary wall, so in this case, the creatures would move here to the nearest cube they can perceive. But if the number of concealed cubes exceeds the number of players, then the creatures are no longer fooled and the wall comes down. Line of sight is not blocked by barriers, but movement is, so this creature pack would move towards the barrier and then be halted there. If a creature pack merges with another creature pack, then they become one large pack, retaining all of their movement cubes. If the initial pack still has movement points remaining on this movement cube, then the whole pack continues to move. And if a full pack were to exceed the capacity of a room, then you would move the strongest units first and leave the weakest behind. When you come to the red initiative, you'll resolve a round of melee combat in each melee on the board. Melee is resolved in 3 steps: heroes deploy, heroes action, and creatures action. And while you work through them in that order, you'll resolve all the effects simultaneously. First, you'll deploy heroes. You can think of the melee as one big all-in brawl between the heroes and the creatures, and in this step you're determining who's taking which attacks from which creatures. First, determine the total attacks your team is facing, based on the crossed swords icon. So here there are 4 minions, for a total of 4 attacks, and a boss which does 2 attacks, a total of 6. The number of attacks your hero can defend is based on this icon here, so the thief can defend 2. In initiative order, declare which monster attacks you're going to engage with. You don't have to fill all of your slots. Let's say, for example, the barbarian declares to fight against 1 spider and 1 of the 2 attacks from the boss. And I'm just using this cube as a visual aid. The mage then declares the boss's second attack, and the thief declares against 1 skeleton. Leftover attacks are then automatically deployed into leftover slots, starting with the enemies with the highest hit points and going down to lowest. A hero is said to be engaged with each creature whose attack it faces. If there are still enemy attacks remaining when all players' slots are full, then you'll keep assigning them in this way. However, the excess ones are undefended attacks, and the heroes will not be able to mitigate damage from those attacks. A hero who is in melee but not engaged is considered covered, and you can think of that as being at the back of the room with a bit more flexibility on actions. You'll now proceed to the hero melee actions, and you can do this in any order, not just initiative. Most of the time this will be to make a melee attack, and to do this you must put an action cube in the room. Then choose one creature to attack. It must be a creature you're engaged with, or if you're covered, it can be any in the room. You'll now use mana cubes from your stock to launch your attack. And you'll do it on this 3-dimensional combat board. This is a dexterity challenge. Without having your fingers cross this red line, you can move the cubes down the board by flicking, by throwing, or by any other means, including one or more at a time. You can send down as many or as few as you'd like, and you stop at any time. You can also intentionally try to use cubes to flick other cubes out of inopportune areas, and that's a key part of the battle strategy. What you're trying to do is land cubes in the hit area to land hits on your opponent, or in the dodge area to save against attacks. Once you're done rolling, resolve the cubes in the following order. First, if you have more than one cube touching the black area, you lose all of those cubes to the reserve area. Then, if you have more than one cube touching the red area, you lose all of those to your reserve. Now you can apply hit modifiers. For example, if I used a weapon which adds 1 to hit, then for each 1 that is added, you can move a cube up to the next level. If a penalty results in negative hit, then you will move cubes from your top space down. You can spend a white shield from your supply to your reserve to move a hit from orange to yellow dodge, or spend a white sword to move from yellow dodge to orange hit. Move anything which straddles 2 zones into the area of your choosing, except that if it straddles the purple fumble area, it must go into fumble. Then remove any non-scoring cubes to your reserve. Count up the damage you apply to the enemy, which is all of the hits, so here it's 5, minus 2 for each fumble, so a total of 3. If you've unlocked and spent your coloured sword, then you can double the hits from orange. The enemy loses that health, and if its health drops to 0, it's killed. If it's not killed, then you can track its health on the hour board. If you fumble so hard that the end result is negative, then you lose 1 health, regardless of how negative it was. Next, you'll use your dodge to try to avoid the attacks that you're engaged with. Here I have 3 dodge, and I can double it by spending my coloured shield if I've unlocked it. Each attack that you're engaged with will do this much damage unless you can defend it with this much dodge. Between these 2 attacks, I would need a total of 4 dodge. I have only 3, so I would use 3 to defend against this, and I would suffer 1 damage from the skeleton. If you had any undefended attacks, you would automatically lose the damage. The exception to this is if you charge into battle, meaning you go into a room as the only hero in a room of creatures ahead of the melee phase in an action round. If this happens, the creatures do not attack you back. Finally, as long as you are a player who has a melee type of weapon, then all of your cubes that are still on the combat board go back to your stock, ready for use again. Otherwise, those cubes go to your reserve. This is the main way to attack, but there are several others. If you have an attack type of power that costs an action, then you can spend your melee action doing that. But be careful. These often do not result in rolling cubes. And so while the ability may do some good damage, you don't have anything which gives you dodge, meaning you could be suffering a lot of hits from the enemy. If you're in the melee and covered, then you can choose to make a ranged attack instead of a melee attack from the opposite side of the room. You resolve the attack part of this exactly the same way that you do a melee attack. But you have the benefit that the enemies cannot fight back, and so you don't have to worry about dodging. You'll get these cubes back to your stock if you have a ranged weapon in your supply. A player without a ranged weapon would lose those cubes. You can also make a ranged attack in your Explore activation if the enemy you're shooting is in line of sight, which is defined as it was for creature movement. You can shoot over any distance, but if the range is 4 or more, then you have a -1 hit modifier. And you can shoot through occupied rooms, but a room containing between 3 and 5 enemies has a -1 hit modifier, and 6 or more is a -2. You can only shoot through a barrier if you are adjacent to that barrier. Think of it as ducking out from behind the barrier to take your shot. You can choose to flee a melee as your melee action, moving to an adjacent room which has been explored. This would not be valid. You still make a roll and you still have to dodge any incoming attacks you're engaged with, but you ignore all hits. Everything here is focused on dodging as much damage as possible before fleeing. You can choose not to take a hero melee action, and you won't spend a cube. You can also take any number of free hero melee actions, which are any items or powers without an action cost effect which impact the combat. Each creature has a number of health, and for stronger creatures it will depend on the player count. And a creature in a full room gains 2 extra health for each adjacent room containing at least one creature. At the end of each action round, any creature that was not killed heals up to its full original health, unless it was attacked with a power which applies permanent wounds. That means players need to coordinate attacks against the biggest enemies to get the whole job done in one round. Once a creature is killed, then the players get rewards. All players, including those who are not in the fight, gain experience. 1 experience for killing all of one type of minion in a room, 1 experience for killing a leader, and the experience showing on the card for killing a boss. For killing a leader or a boss, the players get to do a treasure check for both coins and items. We saw how to do a search for coins earlier with the search room action, and the spoils are shared by all players who are either in the melee or contributed range damage. Then, to do the treasure check for items, flip the 3 cards you drew over. Discard any that are too expensive for the type of creature you just killed. For leaders, that's anything that's 6 and above, and for bosses, that's anything that's 8, 10, 12, or 14 and above, depending on the difficulty of the boss. So if this were a yellow boss, then you would discard only this 14 cost coin. The eligible players now draft these in initiative order, and can choose to decline an item if they wish. Finally, if you kill a boss, you draw a clue. Each creature has a special ability or modification to its stats, and I'm not going to go through all of these, but I will point out ST, or saving throw. Before facing a creature with a saving throw, you must attempt to meet that number of dodges using a roll on the board. You can use as many throws as you want, but this time if you roll fumble, it counts against your dodge total. If you fail to reach the number of dodge required by the saving throw, then you apply the negative effect of that enemy. But all normal throw rules apply to losing and regaining mana. The action phase ends at the end of an action round if all players are either out of action cubes or choose to pass, and there are no active melees. If either of these is untrue, then play another full action round. It may occur that you find yourself in a melee, and your stock is either out of action cubes or out of mana, both of which you need to do anything in a melee. In this case, you must take a mandatory free action on your turn to lose any number of hit points in order to regain twice that many cubes in any combination from your reserve. In extreme cases, this mandatory effect could cause your death. The 4th phase is to place new creatures. First, determine which player has placed the most action cubes on the board this round. That hero's current location is called position 0, and the number of cubes the player placed is the cube value. Discard the top item card, and then draw a number of cards equal to the cube value plus the current era's risk value. Then from left to right, find the first cards which have the creature icon on them up to a number 1 higher than this era's encounter risk. In other words, take only the first encounter in eras green and yellow, the first 2 in orange, and so on. For each encounter, creatures will spawn at this position compared with position 0. So here, 2 steps north of position 0. If there's no discovered room, the lead player places a room in the usual way. If your chosen encounter puts you behind the start or off your table, then reverse the direction. Note the colour of the encounter's room. you'll be placing creatures of that matching colour. If this was the first encounter of the round, then on the hour track you place a mini that represents that colour's minion. Skip this step for any subsequent encounters. Then count how many of the encounter room's coloured minions are on the hour track. If it's 0 or 1, then put minions matching the player count in the encounter room. If there are 2, then also place an elite minion. If there's 3, then instead place the matching coloured leader. And if there's 4, instead draw and place a boss. Drawing and discarding from the boss deck until you find a boss whose difficulty matches the current hour's colour. Once there's 5 or more of a minion, you ignore all encounters with that minion for the rest of the game. If you run out of a certain type of minis, then you place the next level up instead. And to finish, place 2 movement cubes in the pack, or 3 if there's a boss among them. You'll go through this exact same encounter procedure the first time you enter any dangerous room during the action phase, so you could end up with multiple creature packs in the same hour. Last is the end of hour phase. Any creature packs who are not at their full complement of movement cubes are replenished. All illusionary walls are removed. For each stack of barriers, count the number of creatures adjacent to it, and then remove 1 barrier for each 2 minions, 1 barrier per leader, and 2 barriers per boss. Players now retrieve all of their player-coloured pieces from the board, which could include the free movement disc, to their reserve. Now retrieve 3 pieces in your colour, which can be cubes, discs, or bonus swords and shields. For each coloured piece you choose not to retrieve, you can instead retrieve 2 white pieces. Stand up any items that you used in this hour, and it's time to proceed to the next hour. If you ever run out of health, then your hero dies. If this happens during a green or yellow hour, you respawn at the start of the next hour. Restart in a room with a hero who is not in melee, but lose all your coins, items, upgrades, and return all stats to their starting positions with 3 experience to spend on your starting upgrades. If you're killed in orange or red, then your death is permanent, and your hero no longer counts towards any effects that vary by player count. In addition to treasure checks and killing enemies, you can also gain experience by completing the side quests on the hour board. Simply place the cubes on these boards as you meet the goals, and then, once you've scored 2, 3, or 4 in the same box, all players will gain the experience shown at the bottom. Remember that experience is always shared. If one player gains an experience, all players gain the same. We won't cover every room type, but we will go through a few key ones. The eye room is a clue room, and this allows you to gain clues. This room cannot be activated until it is part of a room group that is at least as large as 4 plus the number of players in the game. So here it is a 7 room group, and that makes it activable. You can now activate it to gain 1 clue card. In an adventure which doesn't use clues, this just gets you a side quest. But if it does use clues, flip it face up. You'll need to continue gathering clues until there are enough clues to point to a unique room in the dungeon. And the adventure book will tell you what you find when you get there. If you ever draw a clue card which is incompatible with another one you already have, simply discard it and draw another. Tombs are places that you can go looking for bosses, which you may need to do to get clues and other bonuses. These become activable once they're part of a room group that is at least 1 more than the number of players in the game. When you activate, draw a boss whose colour matches the current hour, and place a magic shard whose colour matches the room. When you enter a trap room, do a trap check and then deactivate the room. Discard the top item card, and then draw a maximum of 3 cards until you find one with a trap. If you find none, there is no trap, but if you find one, then the trap value is equal to the lower of that card or the current hour's maximum trap. Do a saving roll against the trap's difficulty and then lose the difference in health. The game is played in adventures, and the small description of your adventure will tell you what you need to achieve to win. Setup may require you to flip a map card, and there are two ways this could be used. The first is if there are guard posts represented by these icons. You'll place random rooms with guard post tiles in the appropriate places represented by the map, and these are bosses that you can seek out and fight during the game. The other feature is an inspiration path and inspiration room. You place nothing during setup, but in the quest you'll be attempting to reach the room showing the X. You're rewarded for following the inspiration path with +1 damage on your attacks on the path, if the room matches the colour on the card, and -3 damage to your attacks off the path. The adventure book will tell you what you need to do to win the game. As a minimum, this will require all players gaining a magic shard and exiting the dungeon. If all players die, or the last hour ends, then the players lose. Temple of Horrors is intended to be played as a series of standalone adventures, but you can play a campaign mode carrying your character over between adventures. You keep all items, upgrades and coins between scenarios, and you get to replenish to your starting health for the next scenario. If you fail a scenario, then you're penalised by having to lose a total of 5 experience points worth of upgrades, those being from your tracks or from your powers. But for each adventure you win, the next adventure gets harder by all of the creatures having 1 extra hit point to defeat. The character that dies is out of the campaign forever. There is also a player versus player mode with a possible hidden traitor. Take the traitor card, shuffle it in with as many hero cards as there are players, and then deal 1 card to each player. The adventure tells you the different win conditions for the hero and traitor. At any point, you can declare that another player has gone from friend to opponent, and once they are an opponent, if you're in the same room as them, you'll be in melee. You can also do this during a melee with creatures, springing a surprise attack on your opponent during that melee. Do note that as the traitor, you're only aligned against the other heroes. You are still fighting against the creatures who see you all as enemies. So creature attacks are allocated in the normal way during the hero deploy phase. When 2 heroes face each other in melee combat, both of them do a full set of rolls on their board, and then you'll compare both players' hits against both players' dodge, with the possibility that both suffer damage. When a hero attacks another with a ranged weapon, you'll look only at the attacker's hits and only at the defender's dodge. There's no respawning in player versus player. If you die in green or yellow, you're out of the game. Finally, if you are a loyal hero and you kill another player who turns out to be a loyal hero, then you cannot win the game, even if you meet the other objectives. Players cannot reveal their hero or traitor cards until the end of the game. And that's how to play Temple of Horrors.
Check out the project page of Temple of Horrors. We'll put the link in the description below so you can check it out. If you find this video useful, please help us by hitting that like button and subscribe to the Dice Tower if you haven't already done so.
And if you have any questions, comments or feedback, please leave that in the comments section below.
Thanks for watching and see you next time.